I want you to listen to this pertaining to some major development that I find to be find it to be a bit rewarding towards now possibly various people is taking global warming a little bit more serious. I wish that these occurrences would have taken place 25, 30 plus years ago, but because they didn't, basically we can't cry over spilt milk. But hopefully that there will be a movement, a major movement in trying to save ourselves from a complete total disaster. Please listen.
Welcome back. I'm Rahel Solomon in New York. At Davos, Spain and Finland are reiterating their support for the people of Ukraine. The Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, told Julia he believes Russian President Vladimir Putin has been weakened, and now it's crucial that Europe show solidarity.
The price that the Ukrainian people is paying is so high, and they need to feel the solidarity and the empathy and the commitment of the whole European Union. So we will be with Ukrainian as long as it takes, and I think this is as it lasts. And I think this is crucial to say it because even though the implications, the economic and social implications for the whole European Union is really important, I think it's important to keep in mind that this war is not only about territorial integrity of a third country, but also it goes against the values and principles that we are defending, which of course are democracy, human rights, freedom, and so on and so forth.
And Ukraine's First Lady, I think, echoed that sentiment here today too. Can Spain do more for Ukraine?
Of course, I think that all member states, we can do more, but what we need to keep is the unity.
Right.
The unity in the economic sanctions response against Russian autocrats, the humanitarian aid, the military solidarity through the European Union instruments, but also bilaterally, and finally hosting refugees. In Spain, for instance, we have received so far since the beginning of the war over 150,000 refugees, and they have the same rights that any other Spaniards. So I think the main message is to keep the unity, and of course send the message that we will be there as long as it lasts.
There's a dawning realization, I think, and it's being discussed here, that no one can see a resolution. No one sees what the path here is to peace. Do you share that fear too?
I think it's important that we keep that contact even with Putin. I think I strongly advocate that, for instance, the French government and the German government, which before the war were in this Normandy format, and they reached the Minsk agreement together with the Russian government and the Ukrainian government before the war.
Do you think Putin sees that as weakness, though?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it is important that they take that lead, Chancellor Scholz and President Macron. And the rest of the European Union, we go behind them. And we'll see what happens in the coming months. But the message of unity, I think it's very, very important, especially now, especially after when we see the results of the war, the changes, the lack of a strategy that apparently Putin is suffering. I think it's important that we keep united and we send a message of solidarity and support and backing Zelensky.
And Julia also spoke with the Prime Minister of Finland, Sanna Marin. The nation shares a long border with Russia. The two discussed Europe's strong unity as well as Finland's bid to join NATO.
Well, I think that Europe and its partners have shown incredible unity and strength when we have faced these big challenges. First, the global pandemic, then the war in Ukraine, Russia's brutal attack against Ukraine, and now the energy crisis that we are in middle of. I think we will stay united, we will stay strong, and we need to be even more stronger. And we also need that cooperation, that partnerships with our closest and trusted allies, such like the United States, Canada, but also our partners in Asia, in the Pacific. We need more democratic countries cooperating together to facing these geopolitical challenges that we have faced.
Is Ukraine winning? Because some of the discussion, at least I'm having here, is the fear that there's no end in sight. And if there's no end in sight for the poor people of Ukraine in this war, then the consequences, and all of which, and many of which at least you just mentioned, continue too.
Ukraine will win the war with our support, and the clear message that we have to send is that we will support as long as is needed. Whether it's another year, whether it's 5 years, whether it's 10 or 15 years, we will continue supporting Ukraine, putting more heavier sanctions against Russia, sending more and more advanced weapons into Ukraine, and then, of course, humanitarian aid, financial aid, taking refugees from Russia, from Ukraine. And we need to make sure that Ukraine will win. It will win the war with our help. There's no other alternative.
Can I ask about the Leopard 2?
Of course
and
you
the
can.
decision on that? When will you make a decision? How will you make a decision? Are you waiting for others first?
We need European decision. Together we have to make that decision. Finland is willing to participate, and we need everybody on board. Ukraine needs more weapons. They need more advanced weapons. They need Leopards, and they need also other kind of weapons, and we need to support them. I think this decision will happen. I'm not sure when, hopefully soon, that we can send also this kind of material to Ukraine. They need our help.
It's also a decision for your own borders as well, and part of the reason for the decision over accession to NATO too. The message, it seems, from Turkey, at least in the past few days, is, we'll...
I want to take you now back to Davos, where the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is giving a special address. Let's listen.
For climate neutrality. Then came February 24. Since then,
Thought I would go ahead and play just a little bit of that pertaining to the war and various decisions that's being made about that war over there in that area. You know, for some reason, that whole region over there has been plagued with major catastrophes, going all the way back, I guess, to the whatever his name was, King Young or whatever he was over there, that wanted to dominate and desecrate and try to overpower everybody else. You keep in mind that bloodshed and war has not been a stranger to those people. But neither has bloodshed and war been a stranger to the people over in the Middle East. Now we're seeing this bloodshed and this ridiculous, endless pain that is persistent on people wanting to kill people, that is of the derivative of the Luciferian Lucifer. He's the one that would love to see humanity basically destroy themselves. He's the one that has made his own bed hard, his own decision, in basically manufacturing his own doom by being rebellious against the Holy Eternal Father. And because of it, he's like a drowning person. He wants to take everybody with him. That's the best analogy that I know to give, so that possibly somebody will be able to understand what his interior motive is towards out to kill, steal, and destroy. The Bible is very, very clear that he is an adversary. He has never been a friend. He has never been honest. He has never been for the humanity side of humanity. He has always been strictly for himself. And now we're seeing the manifestation of that, in which what he done towards deceiving everybody and their brother. And it's only been until just recently that people have taken global warming, the initiative of global warming, serious. So please listen to this. This is a special address here that I feel like that every leader of every country needs to listen to, that's basically plotting or planning not just our future, not just their future, but all of our futures. If we don't awaken and turn the ship around that's heading into this storm, I don't think the ship is going to be able to withstand the storm. That's how severe and that's how intense, and that's the passion that I have towards what I'm looking at. Now, some people say, Dennis, you get too passionate, you get too loud, you get too emotional, you get too this, you're too tense, Dennis. You're too tense. You need to loosen up. You need to go get a fishing pole and put in your hand. You need to go do this. You need to go do that. Well, I'm sure they told all the other prophets the same thing whenever they was trying to tell them what they was trying to tell them, and it basically went through one ear and out the other until after it was too late. This is the part that my son don't realize. My son don't realize that I'm not necessarily fighting for my future at the age of 61, because I've basically already lived my life. I haven't lived my whole life, but the vast, intense successes that I've made in my life, in which I've made a lot of failures. You know, whenever his mother and I, basically whenever I had my major accident towards falling off of a 4-story building, we decided that we was going to try to give the relationship another try, in which we actually done it one other time beyond that, and that didn't work out neither. But during the time that I was healing from 2 broken legs, 2 crushed ankles, 3 crushed vertebrae, 2 ruptured discs, 2 broken arms, laid in the hospital 6 weeks, 3 days flat on my back, the drug activity here in this particular area was overwhelming. And it wasn't what they are dealing with today pertaining to meth or fentanyl, but heroin was out there, Quaaludes was out there, cocaine, I guess, has always been out there. I've only done cocaine one time, and I didn't like it. Maybe it was a bad batch of cocaine, I don't know. But drugs was predominant in this area at that time. And whenever me and her was trying to raise my only son, there was times, it's 1,000 wonders that we didn't harm and hurt either ourselves or hurt him towards getting into the fights that we was getting into during the time that I had somebody over at my house that I didn't have no idea that was basically being a drug pusher, a dope fiend. Especially whenever I caught about 4 or 5 pounds of pot in the house, and about 2,000 hits of acid, and I don't know, probably 10,000 RJSs and everything else in there. I mean, what my son don't realize is, yes, I am his father. And yes, I have made horrendous mistakes. But what my son really don't realize is that I am not fighting necessarily for my future, pertaining to putting out the evidence, the data that I've been putting out to the world, pertaining to what we're doing to the world. But it's because of people like him in his 40s and in their 30s and in their 20s. I am trying to, I guess the right word would be resurrect the knowledge of just exactly how severe that all this is, that once more should have been addressed 25, 30 plus years ago and was not. So whenever I stand up and I make these videos and I'm doing what I'm doing towards talking about some of my mistakes and talking about, yes, some of my successes too as well, because you got to admit it was a very successful thing for somebody to have an accident like that and pick back up on their feet and then get into a different occupation towards the auto body trade, in which that's where a great deal of my high-tech knowledge come from, was in that industry, that basically becomes self-sustainable for the next 30, 35, 40 years, or 35 years. I mean, that is an achievement of itself, in addition to all the other close encounters that I've had with all the other accidents. Once more, whenever I make these videos, whenever I do the work that I'm doing, just like me going out to Oklahoma and over into Waco and being spot on towards interviewing people, and just like me being up here in Land Between the Lakes and knocking on people's doors and getting people's interviews, this is all part of my work. This is all part of that in which what I feel like that the Father has called me into, other than me trying to be self-sustainable in the occupation that I was in towards making a living for myself and my family. Well, the majority of that's in behind me now. I'm 61 years old. And it's time to look into the future towards other greater matters. And the greatest matter that I feel like is the sin of mankind. The greatest matter that I feel like that whenever you look at the beginning phases of Revelations in the King James Bible, you will identify real quick what's going to happen if we do not, I'm going to repeat it one more time. If we do not wake up to that in which what we have been deceived about and what has occurred for the past 30 plus years, if we do not change the direction of this, I'm going to use this analogy as a ship fixing to go off into the perfect storm, we're not going to be strong enough to withstand the storm. And it's going to take a part in all 198 countries. I think it's 198. It may be a little less than that. It's going to take the strategy, the gratitude, the passion. It's going to take the fortitude, and it's going to take some changing. You're going to have to realign your way of thinking. You're going to have to become a little bit more smarter. You're going to have to use your TikToker up on top of your head for more than just sitting around casually spending some time at the beach listening to the seagulls and the ocean coming in and out. We're at a crisis. And that's the part that I don't think has quite yet nailed it to the cross pertaining to where we are right now in history. We're at a crisis moment. Even Mr. Biden, the United States president, made mention of that during Martin Luther King Remembrance holiday weekend, that we are at a reflection, a crossroads. And if we don't do the proper and right things as adults today, that means our children and our grandchildren and their children are going to suffer immensely. And you wonder how come I'm so passionate. You wonder how come sometimes I get a little loud. You wonder how come sometimes I become a bit, I guess, pushy, I guess would be the right word, is because I realize that so much is on the line. The stakes have never been higher than what they are right now. So please, please listen to this particular address that is being spoken of as of right now over in this particular area.
Russia has been waging an imperialist war of aggression here on our doorstep in Europe, with dreadful consequences that Ukrainians are bearing more than anyone. Just today, the Secretary of the Interior and 15 other victims were killed in a tragic helicopter crash.
They perished.
We are with their families. But the war is also...
If there's ever been a time that the world needed to work together instead of tearing itself apart, I think it is today. Now, there's no doubt you can look at wars, big wars, like World War I, World War II, even other various wars, that has helped to eradicate the worst of the worst by us turning things around and eventually stop mutilating one another and start helping one another. How many times is this lesson going to have to be repeated until learned pertaining to these major wars? And that's where I see the Russian-Ukrainian war heading to. I see it coming to a major calamity. And according to the Bible, the main major calamity will be over in the Middle East of a 1,000,000-man army where the blood will get as deep as a horse's bridle in the river Euphrates, because the river Euphrates is going to dry up. I understand that there's always been skirmishes. There's always been disagreements. There's always been problems. But of some of the worst times to embark up into a war right after the world has just got through basically being hit by one of its greatest challenges pertaining to COVID. I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's smart. And I don't think that Putin is within his right mind towards what that he has started, because the Western world did not lie to him about the agreement that happened with the Reagan administration. It just so happens the founder, the very speaker that's speaking to you right now, could not motivate, could not rally the church world in supporting the endeavors that he felt like that God had placed up into his life. And I do emphasize upon God's endeavors, not my endeavors. I could care less about my personal endeavors, in a sense, towards me trying to be something that I'm not, or create a name for myself, or being some sort of a celebrity hound towards trying to become famous in some sort of way. I could care less about all that, especially at the age of 61. Especially due to the fact that I never could get the Western world to awaken that the biblical Bible prophecies verified that in which what I was standing up and doing and talking about, just like the Luciferian Lucifer that basically manifested himself into a bodily form, that was smart enough whenever people come and asked him, "Are you the Antichrist?" that he said, "No, I am not the Antichrist, but I am a follower of his." For some strange reason, people around here did not grasp that in which what I was talking about pertaining to Satan coming before the false prophet, and then the false prophet coming before the actual Antichrist. Now, there's been Antichrists in the world ever since the beginning of the world. People that wanted to break the laws of God, people that didn't want to acknowledge God, people that could care less about God. There's been the Antichrist engulfing satanic spirits that has inundated this planet since the beginning of time. This is nothing unusual or nothing new. But to think that the Western world was willing to basically not only drag itself off into the mouth of the volcano towards destroying itself, but destroying the whole planet. That's the reason why that I am so heartbroken about how that I have been treated. Not just within the past 8 years since I come back to Northwest Tennessee, in which that's been bad enough, especially at the point of having a death of a sibling at the age of 51. My younger brother. That was bad enough. But to think that I have put forth this type of energy, this type of fortitude, this type of passion, that I have been this constantly towards trying to awaken the churches, and to think that basically they have bitten the hand that was trying to feed them, it goes beyond a heartbreak. I don't even know that there's a word that can characterize towards my feelings about how much that the founder of the Windmill Ministries feels like that the church world has let him down. That's the reason why I say continuously that they put me out on a limb. I was used. I was taken advantage of. White man speaketh with forked tongue. They want to talk about the one world government. They want to talk about the Antichrist and the mark of the beast and the false prophet. But yet now, whenever somebody such as myself is actively pursuing that, they back away. And if it was my desires, my dreams, my endeavors, I would say, well, I don't blame them. But the thing about it is, wasn't none of this of my doings. It was brought upon to me more so than I brought it upon to it. In other words, the Heavenly Father chose me to bring forth this message. I realize it's not the most predominant message. I realize that it's talking about end time days. I realize it's talking about some very, very drastic things that's going to happen to the planet Earth. But I hope that now, since I have been more vociferous with my message, that they can understand just within the past few years towards my social media platforms that I have put out to the general public, that my interest is towards helping society and not hurting them. Especially at the point of where they are right now, towards their doom and gloom and despair, that because of this resistance movement has caused this. Now, we got two decisions to make. We can either wake up, kick ourselves in the ass because we didn't do the right thing and start doing the right thing, or we can continue to do what we're doing, even though we're hoping for a better result or a better ending, knowing good and well that it's not going to occur, which is basically the sign of insanity. I don't know if it's because I've been dealing with the baby boomers over here in the Western world. I don't know because Satan had such of a toehold onto these people to the point that they refused that they was going to acknowledge or try to enhance some of the teachings coming from the Windmill Ministries ministry. I don't know. That's all spilt milk as far as I'm concerned. And there's nothing that I can do at this point in time towards trying to mend that performance out of the public, especially out of the church world. I can't be responsible for what other people does, no more than I can be responsible for what people don't do that they should have done. The only thing that I'm responsible for is for the things that God has embarked up into my life, and that's the reason why that I continue to be passionate. That's the reason why I continue to make these videos. That's the reason why I continue to do whatever it takes, regardless whether there's more severe consequences towards me going to jail or being shoved off into some sort of a mental institution on account of me putting out these messages. And I think maybe the older class society, the baby boomers, that yes, went through that same era that what I was talking about, pertaining to the drug culture, pertaining to all the weed, pertaining to the cocaine, pertaining to the heroin, pertaining to all the other stuff that come out in the late 70s, early 80s. I think some of them people may be able to open up their eyes now and realize, you know what, we have made a drastic mistake over here. A mistake in the Western world that is now causing havoc all over the planet. And it's not just the mistake about the spirituality of the Windmill Ministries, but it's the mistake about the planet, it's the mistake about living in the end time days, and it's all the above. And if people can't relate to that and identify with that, well then I'm sorry. Basically, I have absolutely nothing to lose, because for the past 30 plus years, I've not gained a Joe Osteen support team or a congregation crowd to begin with. So in actuality, what do I have to lose at this point in time in the gesture of my life at the age of 61? That's the reason why that I went ahead and pleaded guilty to a charge that I know I wasn't guilty of, towards stalking a family that my brother and I was concerned about, 3 little children across the road. In the meantime, trying to fight off the battle between the landlord and about half the community around here at the same time. And it was so overwhelming and so heartbreaking, because we are not just passive in coming here and calling this place home. My father was raised up here. Partly he was raised up north because of the 1929 Depression, but his father was raised up here, Kelmer. Kelmer's father was raised up here pertaining to Jeff. Jeff's father was raised up here pertaining to him fighting in the Civil War, and his father that come from over the Tennessee Ridge, that come over here, they're all buried over in the Hard Shell Primitive Baptist Church in between Mount Peay and Reeves. So I've got some deep, deep roots here, and my brother knew that. Especially the fact that we did have people, and still do have family members, that have worked for the judicial system here in America. And to think that I come back here and got treated the way that I got treated, and plus the way that they treated my brother, I don't have words to express how heartbroken that I have been about all this. And if the people that listen to this can't understand that, then that is not my problem. It is not my fault that they obviously don't want to admit to their weaknesses or don't want to admit to their own faults. The Bible says that we are supposed to confess our sins and confess our weaknesses in that in which what we have done. And if my son cannot accept that as him being my only biological son, then once more, I cannot do anything else other than to tell him the facts about what happened with his mother and my mother, and there towards the last, before I even got halfway healed up, she basically abandoned me and went towards the Arab side and basically left me for a bunch of foreigners because of the exchange student deal that they had up here at the university. Those are facts. She was married to this guy for about a year. He had a bad motorcycle wreck. He was on life support system. After 6 months, she couldn't deal with it any longer. She called telephone, and the people thought enough of him to come down here and pick him up and take him back home in the Middle East. And about 30 days later, they called her and said he's dead. He didn't make it. What does she do? She gets involved towards chasing the money again. And I do wish the best for her, my first wife. I don't wish nothing bad upon her. I hope that she has followed her dreams and her pursuits, and I hope that she has been a happy camper ever since she decided that she was going to do what she done. But what my son don't realize, that it takes two to tangle, and that the fault falls just as equally upon to her doings than it does mine. Like I said, she got entangled with the foreign affairs, and then after he died, she done it again. And today she's still married to somebody, I think, from over in either Libya or Pakistani or Afghanistan or something like that. But my family was targeted. My family was targeted going all the way back to whenever the anointing fell up into my life up in Illinois that I didn't even realize was going on at that time. But I basically had a bullseye planted on the back of my back because God was batting in my corner. And at the age of 61, I feel like that he still is. Because I feel God's anointing upon my life every day. There's not a day that goes by that I do not show my gratitude towards God. Am I perfect? No. Can I walk on water? No. Have I ever raised the dead? No. Can I turn water into wine? No. Have I ever healed the blind? No. But just because I haven't done it yet doesn't mean that I won't be able to do it yet. That's where we as Christians have to strive towards the perfection that Jesus himself was striving towards being perfect, even as our Heavenly Father is perfect. Hopefully, I can redeem myself through the eyes of the people, and there will be a Joe Osteen support team or a group of people that will awaken pertaining to all this evil doing that has occurred in my personal life since the age of 1983, which is now 40 years ago. This is the anniversary of that event that occurred. I think it was somewhere around April, whenever I had that automobile accident driving a 1979 Buick Regal with a V6 with a turbo in it. My life from that moment changed drastically, because I knew without a shadow of a doubt that those two hands that come out of heaven that miraculously saved my life, along with the intense care from the doctors, wisdom and knowledge up in Martin, Tennessee, whenever they took me to the emergency room, I knew at that particular point that my life was spared for a purpose. There's been times that I've run from that purpose. There's been times that I didn't want to face this. I just put out a video the other day that made reference to a movie that I recently watched called The Eye, where this girl was blinded at the age of 5, and she had this transplant done, and the eyes that was given to her had such of a profound effect, this is all Hollywood now, that she started being able to see into the future. And she basically saved the lives of hundreds of people due to a major accident that happened on the road, where this 18-wheeler that was hauling this fuel basically blowed up. But there towards the end of the movie, the commentator explained, as she was in this concert, that the gifts of being able to see into the future is a gift in one way, but a curse in another. And the reason why it's a curse is because you got to be able to live with the things that the Heavenly Father has showed you of the drastic catastrophes that's going to occur, especially if humanity don't awaken. And I'm pretty sure Noah had to live with those same envisions that God had planted up into his heart and his mind. I'm pretty sure that Noah had to live with the same, not only visions, but you can look at both accounts. They not only had to live with their visions towards what they was hoping it wouldn't occur, but then they had to live with what did occur. Moses had to live with thousands and thousands of people that died because he was called of God to liberate the children of Israel. He had to live with that. It's kind of like murder. Anybody can kill anybody. Anybody can take anybody's life. But the hard part is living with it. Providing that you got a conscience, providing that you got a soul, providing that you got any type of guilt, shame, or self-ridiculation about yourself towards the acts that you have committed. And I've got lots of shame pertaining to the things that I have done. And I wish that I could redo them. I wish that I never fell off that building in 1979 hanging iron. Whenever that crane gave way and the iron that I was walking on, all of a sudden, suddenly, drastically went out from underneath my feet. I wish that never occurred. Because why? Because I got to live with those pains and those scars every day. Whenever I get up and hit the floor with my feet and all my weight on those injuries, you don't think that I suffer endlessly every day pertaining to the pains and the agonies and the scars that has occurred in my life before? Absolutely. And these are the things that I'm trying to prevent others of not having to go through the scars and the pains like I did. And this is the part that people like my son don't understand. I don't think he's got empathy or sympathy for what I have went through, and I don't think he's got empathy or sympathy for what I'm going through. And I really don't think that he understands that what I'm doing right now isn't necessarily for me, but it's for him and his children and his children's children. But whenever you're blinded and you can't see the facts, you can't see the trees for the forest, he's going to believe what he's going to believe. And he's going to do what he's going to do, regardless whether he wants to throw another wedge between me and him pertaining to this last relationship that he's having with this Ukrainian girl, which she seems to be a very, very good girl. She's very smart. She seems to be. I think she works in the medical profession. She's young. She's already had one daughter. Now she's going to have another child by my child. And once more, if he chooses to do the things that he done on his first relationship towards keeping me out of his relationship, well, that will be up to him. That will be something that he'll have to live with. You know, I tried and tried and tried there towards having a relationship with my father. But my father was so desperately against me. And I don't know if it was a pride, ego issue. I don't know. Maybe it was stupidity. I don't know. But that man maintained his status towards hating me, I guess, to the very day that he died. Hated me. Put me in the same category as somebody preaching the Word of God out of the Bible as somebody on the bottle. Now, if that don't give you a clear definition towards what type of mindset that he had about one of his own sons, I don't know what else will. Whenever you characterize somebody that's out here preaching the Word of God, and I'm not saying that I never drunk a beer, because I have, but I never let it get a hold of me to the point that that's all I done was drink, like my older brother did, that basically drunk himself to death. But you would think that he would have had enough sense to say, yes, Dennis, I feel like that you're a much greater man than what your brother was, because he chose the wrong avenue towards the bottle and you chose the Bible. But my dad didn't see it that way. Or he didn't while he was living. Or if he did, he didn't express it to me that way. He seen me being obsessed with God, the Bible. But you got to keep in mind, this same man that I'm talking about seen his own mother obsessed towards being Bible crazy, that basically throwed her up against the wall trying to choke her towards accusing her of being Bible crazy. Well, you know what? That man paid for that. He went for 13 years driving from here to Dresden, Tennessee, looking and watching his mother steadily deteriorating in the body form after her mind had already done completely gone. In other words, he would go and visit a stranger every time he went in to that nursing home and he visited her, because she could not even recognize who her own son was. Her body functioning was still working, but her mind had completely, totally collapsed to the point that she didn't even know who she was, much less who anybody else was. Well, you don't think that that was painstaking? Sure it was. As a matter of fact, he even openly admitted to that it was one of the most horriblest things that he had ever had to face, was waking up and going and visiting his mother, and his own mother couldn't even recognize him, didn't recognize him. He had to go through that for 13 years, being punished that way. And he couldn't wake up in understanding that it was God that was allowing the devil to bring this type of punishment into his life, towards him trying to wake up and realizing, Bob, the time that you was called upon a God and you walked halfway down to the altar and you turned around and you walked back and sat down in your seat, that was whenever you chose the wrong choice. And from then on, his life was miserable. And because his life was miserable, he tried to make everybody else's life miserable around him. My son can't see that. My son don't want to see that. And because he don't want to see that, I just as well quit letting him know that my father had a bad disease. And my father walked away from God, that basically left room in his heart for 7 more demons. And there towards the last, it was only there towards the very, very last, within the last 5 minutes of his life, whenever he made a conscious decision that determined on whether or not he was going to go to heaven or go to hell. And that was only whenever a priest come in and prayed for him, and his hand reached up towards the Bible right before his arm fell and hit the blankets, and then his vital signs started going crazy, and within 2 minutes he was dead. He flatlined. They claimed the last thing to go is your hearing. And I'm pretty sure he could hear everything that was going on in that room. Even though I was up in Kansas City, Missouri at the time, I didn't have time to come down here and tend to him. Once more, I don't think it would have done any good, because every time I got around the man, I thought I was going to cause him to fall into a coronary arrest. And because of me having a conscience, I didn't want to walk around feeling like that I caused his death, a premature death. So I basically walked away from the relationship. I had no other choice. But you know, my son does have a choice. My son's got a choice, and he'll be the one to have to live with that choice. Just like my father had to live with his choices, and just like everybody else is going to have to live with theirs. Now the choices has come back to the world towards what are you going to do about this hole that you have dug for you, not only yourselves, but for your children and your children's children, pertaining to global warming. What are you going to do? Because you'll make a choice. And in not making a choice, you've made a choice. And that's the part that I don't think the people around here quite understand. By you not making a choice, you are actually making a choice. For Christ said that you was either for him or against him. And he that was for me could not be against me. And why in the world these people around here have brainwashed themselves in believing that I was some sort of a devil or an antichrist. I'm just going to bring this up real quick. A woman that I know up the road here has been helping this elderly lady. I think she's about 98 years old. She was actually the wife to I almost said Buford Pulser. I get them mixed up. To a man here that used to be the sheriff, and he was only the sheriff for a while, Lewis Taylor. He was a school bus driver. He was a big man, big arms, he probably weighed 250 pounds, and he wasn't fat. He was just a big man, tall man, long arms, big hands, school bus driver, and then he pursued towards wanting to become a sheriff. He was only a sheriff a short time because something happened in the county that a group of people should have went to jail for, but because the evil demonic people that was still in charge of this county basically told him, leave them alone, act like you didn't see nothing or hear nothing, and walk away from it. He resigned the following next day. They wouldn't let him go ahead and walk away from his position because they didn't have nobody to fill his position. But this same woman I wanted to talk to, and I asked this lady that I know that takes care of this woman, goes and gets her groceries and takes care of her, asked her if she cared if I went and talked to her. Her son actually is the one that owns the dealership up here in Martin. He owns a dealership in Union City. He also just recently opened up a dealership in Paris. These people have a footing in this area. This lady that I'm talking about asked her if she minded me coming over there and documenting her on record towards talking about the things of the past. She immediately spoke up and said, absolutely not. She asked why. She said, because everything that I've heard about him, he was crazier than a Betsy bug. Crazier than a Betsy bug. She had bought into all the lies about Juby, the individual who's talking to you right now. And because of it, she would actually feel, I guess, uneased, eerie would be the word. She would feel maybe scared or frightened if me and her got in the same room together towards me talking to her about her family, my family, different people that we've brushed up against throughout our lives here. She's got like 35 years over on me, so I know good and well she knows a great deal of the people that I know, and I know a great deal of the people that she knows. But because of the imagery, the damage that has been done in this area by the Luciferian Lucifer, that began with my father, towards going around preaching to everybody and telling them that he had one son on the bottle and one on the Bible. It was my father that was the sick one. But what's even sadder is that the people that was convinced by him is even sicker in my eyes. Especially those that seen the abusivenesses that was going on in the family and didn't have the vendacity to either stop it themselves or get on the telephone and call somebody that possibly could. Now, if that does not speak volumes about that group of people that I was raised up with back in the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, early 80s, before I myself spread my wings and started doing my thing, in which I went through some horrible, horrible events. I went through trauma. Trauma. You don't have 2 broken legs and 2 crushed ankles and a broken back and 2 broken legs and lay in the hospital for 6 weeks and think that you haven't gone through some sort of a trauma. But because God had toughened me to the other traumas that I had been exposed to, family abuses as well as various accidents, I fortunately lived through the trauma and healed back up and got back on my feet and worked for 35 years towards being self-independent. Do I see anybody around here thanking me for that? No. They still want to categorize me towards me being either a lunatic or a monster, even though my record shows just the opposite. Shows just the opposite towards me being cruel, vicious, and violent. I've never had to experience anything on this level, especially whenever it comes to a social level of how that people have turned their back on the very person that was trying to help them. And I'm sure Noah went through the same thing. Moses went through the same thing. And I know good and well Jesus went through the same thing because they wound up killing him there towards the last. And just about all the other prophets, male or female, basically had to go through the same abuse. Now, the Bible says to leap for joy whenever people shall persecute you for his righteous sake. Okay, so in the spirit world, that means that's a good thing, right? That means I'm going to get a reward. But while I'm still living here on the planet in the physical form, it doesn't make it no easier. Especially whenever your only biological son wants to show his rear end the way that he has showed his rear end for the past 20 plus years and throwing that wedge between our relationship. And like I said, if he can live with it, then that's fine. Let him live with it. It's his loss, not mine. Just like it was James Robert Jackson's loss, my dad that everybody called Bob, it was his loss that he didn't try to regain a relationship with his only son. With his third son out of the 4, that he didn't try to open up his eyes and understand that I had been called into this. I didn't choose this. It chose me. And I truly believe to this day that's the reason why about 2 weeks after his death, me working in the body shop that I was working in Kansas City, Missouri, his spirit come to me, and it was so overwhelming that I literally had to quit working what I was doing, working on a car, and go into the bathroom and remain in the bathroom for 10 or 15 minutes until I could reframe to get back out on the floor. It was his spirit that come to me that was so remorseful. And it was just like as real as anything that could ever be real towards him coming and visiting me. Now, I realize if I say that to the wrong people, especially to the psychiatric world, they're going to say, well, this guy's nuts and he needs to be put on lithium. He needs to be put on Thorazine. Just like whenever I was telling them that 2 hands come out of heaven. It saved my life in 1983. And the people over in Kenton, Tennessee, certain people over there thought that this man must be crazy. Even though I was reaching out for help because my father just got through attacking me the night before. That's the reason why you hear me say again and again and again, obviously these people have been bamboozled. They have been bewitched in the way that they think, how that they have interpreted the Bible, what that they have believed about myself. I've never had to deal with any type of resistances like this, and they continue to keep digging their own holes, but yet no, I continue to see this resistances towards people not being like people are supposed to be. Once more, a good person can make a mistake, but it takes a better one to admit it. And I don't find none of them better people around here. Just like that 98-year woman that refused to embark towards wanting to talk to me in any type of interview or conversation. That hurts. That's deep, especially whenever you got as deep a roots here as what I do back in the early 1800s, whenever my people helped to establish this community. Especially my great-grandfather that had a store right down the road here, less than a quarter of a mile from where I live, that basically, being a dutyator, worked for the state for a while. His wife was a midwife that went around helping bring children into the world. That probably to this day, the very people that now are my age was their fathers or mothers that my great-grandmother helped to bring into the world. You think any of these people see that? You think any of these people are grateful for that? I know this, the courts didn't show it. The courts in Weakley County done just the opposite. They showed their ugly, dirty side, is what they done. They abandoned their responsibilities towards dereliction of duty out here. That once more contributed to David Jeffrey Jackson's death. Now, can I prove that because of these invisible scars? No, I can't prove that right now. But I know it, and I know it to be a fact. And you know what? If the truth be known, if you was to corner certain people that's engaged with law enforcement that was involved in all this stuff that was going on out here, I'm pretty sure they'd tell you the truth too. Yeah, we done wrong. We shouldn't have attacked the Jackson family the way that we did at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, or 430 Beach Grove Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, that basically both pieces of property was joined into one. Please listen.
It's also having an impact on all of us. For a while, energy prices jumped to levels higher than we had ever seen before. Around the world, production costs and consumer prices exploded. Many people fear that coal and oil will make a lasting comeback all across the world. If that were to happen, the 1.5 degree target would become meaningless. Our supply chains must be adopted to new geopolitical realities. Realities that you called a messy patchwork of powers in your speech yesterday, Klaus. And over all of this hangs a sword of Damocles, the danger of a new fragmentation of the world, of deglobalization and decoupling. And yet, ladies and gentlemen, this is just one part of the story of last year, just one part of the reality that we are looking at here in Davos. The other part of the story is this. Russia has already failed completely in reaching its imperialist goals. Ukraine is defending itself with great success and impressive courage. A broad international alliance led by the G7 is providing the country with financial, economic, humanitarian and military support. Germany alone made available over 12 billion euro last year, and we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as necessary. In Berlin at the end of October, we worked with international experts to draw up a Marshall Plan for the long-term reconstruction of Ukraine. A platform of major donors is coordinating the process and, in consultation with Ukraine, ensuring that it is well implemented. Private sector capital will play a key role here. I know that many companies in Germany and beyond are very aware of the opportunities that the Ukrainian economic miracle could offer to them, particularly as the country moves toward the European Union after the end of the war. But in order for the war to end, Russia's aggression must fail. That is why we are continuously supplying Ukraine with large quantities of arms in close consultation with our partners. This includes air defense systems like IRIS-T or Patriot, artillery, and armored infantry fighting vehicles, marking a profound turning point in German foreign and security policy. And there's another part to the story of last year. Within a few months, Germany made itself completely independent from Russian gas, Russian oil, and Russian coal. We concluded new partnerships in Asia, Africa, and America, thus lessening our dependence. And so I can say that our energy supply for this winter is secure. Thanks to well-filled storage facilities, thanks to improved energy efficiency, thanks to remarkable solidarity within Europe, and thanks to the readiness of our companies and of millions of citizens to save energy. As a result, energy prices have recently seen a huge stop and drop. Our measures to reduce the burden on private citizens, companies and businesses are working. Inflation is falling slowly, thanks incidentally also to resolute moves by the central banks. Industrial production in Germany has remained stable over the past few months against all the odds. Our employment rate is at record levels and has recently increased even further. Most importantly, our transformation toward a climate-neutral economy, the fundamental task of our century, is currently taking on an entirely new dynamic. Not in spite of, but because of the Russian war and the resulting pressure on us Europeans to change. Whether you are a business leader or a climate activist, a security policy specialist or an investor, it is now crystal clear to each and every one of us that the future belongs solely to renewables. For cost reasons, for environmental reasons, for security reasons, and because in the long run, renewables promise the best returns. So yes, the past year brought fundamental change for Germany and Europe. But Germany itself has fundamentally changed as well. We are resolutely pushing forward with the decarbonization of our industry. We want to be climate neutral by 2045, and at the same time we will remain a country with a strong manufacturing sector. And despite all the difficulties this past year showed us, we can and we will succeed in that. In less than 7 months, we built up an entirely new import infrastructure for LNG in Wilhelmshaven. In the future, it can also be used for hydrogen. Just last Saturday, I opened our second LNG terminal within just a few weeks in Lubmin. The day after tomorrow, another terminal ship is expected to arrive at the port of Brunsbüttel. More will follow. This is not only good news for our energy security and that of our European neighbors who will be receiving gas from these terminals. Above all, it shows Germany can be flexible, we can be unbureaucratic, and we can be fast. I spoke of a new Deutschlandgeschwindigkeit, in this regard a new German speed. We will make this German speed the benchmark, also for the transformation of the economy as a whole. Your companies can hold us to this standard. A new law mandates that the expansion of wind power, solar energy, as well as electricity and hydrogen networks now take priority. We will make available no less than 2% of our country for wind power with a minimum of red tape. We have streamlined
And we are
our
listening there
processes
to German
so that
Chancellor Olaf
approvals
Scholz
for
addressing the
electricity,
World Economic Forum, spending his time exclusively talking about the war, initially talking about the tragic helicopter crash in Ukraine, saying that we are with their families, but then quickly pivoting to Germany's support for Ukraine in its war, saying Ukraine's successful efforts at protecting itself, saying we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as necessary, and also pointing out that Germany has managed to wean itself off of Russian energy, saying it has made itself independent from Russian energy. Again, that was German Chancellor Olaf Scholz there at the World Economic Forum. And that is it for the show. I'm Rahel Solomon. Connect the World with Becky Anderson is next.
Well, let's see where else this is going to go. Let's see if they're going to pick back up on this same interview or speech.
Injured. This crash killed all 9 people aboard the helicopter.
That's what recently just occurred, that they was talking about the helicopter crash that killed all the children. Go forward here. All right, they showed just a little bit of him. They may come back to his speech. Sometimes they do a redo, reeling it back in again towards the subject matters that they're looking at or have been looking at. I feel quite confident that it'll go back. A lot of talk right now, which is a good thing, towards looking out for the future. What people are having to experience, what's going on, what they don't want to see go on. There's a lot of communication right now, which I think is a good thing. As long as you can do it and debate it and without getting violent about it, and try to look over the ridge and see what's possibly coming down the pike, I think it's a good thing. Where is this guy at? Yep, this is where he was just at a while ago. They just talked about it just briefly. Hang in there with me. This is all new charted territory. I'm just doing this by the cuff. I don't know what they're going to talk about, or if they're going to even recycle what they've already done discussed. Most of the time they do. Looks like now they're throwing a whole lot of everything in there. From tennis to sports to who knows what else. All right. Stop it right about there.
Here is a follow-up, in a sense, from what the First Lady said yesterday. Her message was, look, how bad does it have to get? How close to a nuclear battle do you want? How many more lives do you want to lose? And it was a powerful message from the First Lady. Now you're going to have Zelensky himself. And his message, I'm pretty certain once he's dealt with the awfulness of today's events, it's going to be this. That helicopter, yes, helicopter crashes happen, but that helicopter was only in the air on this mission because of the war. Those people would be alive now if it wasn't for the war. And I'm pretty certain as well, he's going to make the strong argument, send tanks, send heavy armaments. This is what we need. I've already heard today from the German Chancellor, who says we'll do whatever they want. We'll send what they need. But at the same time, he's refusing to send the German Leopard 2 tanks. The Poles have told me today, the Polish Prime Minister has said, we will send them, and we want France and Germany to send them too. So what you're looking at, Kate, is a very complex situation, and this helicopter crash is a touchstone in a way that allows Zelensky today to say to these people here, put your money where your mouth is. Don't just keep telling me you support me. You've sent me enough, so you've sent me a lot, it's not enough.
Yeah. Richard, thank you so much for putting the focus on it for us. We're going to be standing by. We're going to be bringing, Richard's going to be waiting for this as well. We're standing by to hear from Zelensky himself. We're going to bring that to you. In the meantime, while we're waiting for Zelensky to get up and going, joining me right now is CNN contributor, former CNN Moscow bureau chief, Jill Doherty. It's good to see you, Jill. Richard said it very well of what is at stake for these remarks coming from Zelensky and the passionate message he's going to be delivering. He has been forced to make appeals like this many times in the last year since the invasion. What does this appeal in this moment to this particular forum, what do you think it does?
I think it really, Kate, encapsulates the rest of the fighting that is to come, because the war has changed. I mean, we still have these attacks. We saw what happened in Indineable when the Russians attacked that apartment building. But the fighting in many different places right now is close combat. And that's why they need those tanks, to really go in and get close to the enemy and be able to attack. And attacking, not just defense, but actually having attack in the spring. They want to have another offensive, the Ukrainians, and they need those tanks. So it's a very specific thing right now. In Europe, it's political, but the key would have to be Germany, both for Germany to provide, as Richard was saying, those Leopard 2 tanks, and for Germany to give the green light to other NATO allies to provide them as well.
What is the resistance? Germany has been a focus of this, and there has been mounting pressure on Germany to send these more modern, more advanced tanks. We know the UK has announced that it's sending a dozen tanks over. I've also heard from retired generals like Wesley Clark was on yesterday, Jill, who said 10 tanks, okay, they need 300 to 500 tanks to really make a difference. Talk to me about the pressure and the mounting pressure and the position that Germany finds itself in here.
What the rest of the countries have squandered on is that Putin has basically opened up his judicial system of those that are in prison, especially those that are in prison for violent crimes and basically are going to die anyway, or they're on some sort of a list of being euthanized out of society because of the crimes that they have committed. And basically he's given them an opportunity that they can live a little longer. And I don't know, he may actually give them some sort of a pardon deal that if they do a good job and come back, that maybe their time will be served. I don't know. But they're vicious, rootless people that he's basically letting out of jails, that's getting a bit of combat training, and then putting them in the field. These people that he's putting out there are some of the most rootless, wickedest, cruelest people in the world. Because these are the people that he had locked up to begin with. So he's enforcing his enforcements by doing this, by putting boots on the ground. And the Ukrainians know it. And the rest of NATO, the rest of the countries that have stood idly by and watched this, to me is an absolutely appalling letdown of the fact that they're letting basically the Ukrainians leading to sheep being at slaughter. Because that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to be led just as sheep led to the slaughter. knowing that they are standing up for a right cause. So to me, it's appalling, similar towards how that I seen it being appalling whenever I was growing up as a child. Of course, most of those people are dead now. But to me, it was appalling to think that the very people that witnessed all this abuse didn't care enough about the family to either stop it themselves or at least pick up the phone and have somebody stop it. Basically, it was a lawless society. And at that time, whenever I was just a young lad growing up, the main ingredients around here that was destroying people's lives was alcohol. Well, now, if you'll topple that times probably 10 with all the drugs, the methanol, the fentanyl, all the other drug activities that these people are addicted to, you see, all I done was experiment with some stuff, and I was smart enough or strong enough to get away from it. I done some things that I know that I shouldn't have done, and if the truth be known, it was probably a silver liner that I fell off a 4-story building and broke both my legs, because the way that I was going as being a teenager, I would have probably wound up either killing somebody or me being killed, or wound up being in jail for the rest of my life. I was going down a bad path at my teenage years whenever I first had my firstborn, my only born, Nicholas. He don't understand that. Or he acts like he don't understand that. And if he doesn't, there's nothing else that I can do other than to plead my case in front of him and tell him, son, I made mistakes. But I learned from those mistakes, and God has enlightened me to get out of all that and try to convince others not to do that. If he accepts that's all the more the merrier, and if he doesn't, well, then that's his loss. And that's the only other way that I know of looking at this. But getting back to this, for those other bigger countries around Ukraine to watch them be led to the slaughter like this is appalling. It's absolutely appalling. And it's one thing to say that you support somebody, and it's another thing to actually support them. Do as I do, not as I say that I'm going to do.
Well, I mean, picture yourself, you're in the middle of Europe, and this war, which began in such a, let's say, unexpected way at the very beginning, that now has morphed into this giant battle, almost like World War I battle in the middle of Europe. And so I think each country, and especially Germany, looking at that, is saying, boy, this is really escalating to the point that we have to now go back to, war on the European landmass. So I think there's part of that is really difficult. And then it's the old debate, how much do you put in there without starting a war directly with Russia? I think that debate is diminishing because Putin is not showing any sign of stopping or even be willing to talk at this point. But that has been the debate, the danger of escalation to the point that you actually could have a war. But I think the First Lady of Ukraine made a very interesting point and really, drove it home. This war could escalate. It could spread. It may not be just Ukraine that is involved. So Europeans are very much now on the line, and you have to show that you really support Ukraine because it's in your own interest. I think that's a potent. Potent.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and part of the warning from the First Lady yesterday was she says Russian aggression was never intended to restrict itself to Ukrainian borders. This work will go further. And I was curious, just from your time in covering Putin, your time in Russia, do you have any doubt that is true if Russia is not decisively stopped?
That's the question of whether they would actually go into other countries in Europe, because so many members of Europe are members of NATO.
Right.
And so would Russia start a war with NATO? I tend to doubt that because they will be defeated. And I think they know that. But there are other ways that Russia can destabilize, grab certain, parts of other countries that aren't necessarily members of NATO. So there's a lot of, damage that can come from this, short of, let's say, nuclear war or war with tanks in other countries.
Jill, thank you so much. Jill's going to stick around with us. We're going to bring you all the remarks from President Zelensky in addressing Davos when they begin. They should be beginning shortly. That's our own Free Zakaria speaking right now. We will get back to that very shortly. But there's also this that we're watching, new and graphic evidence laid out in court just now against the man charged with killing his missing wife. That's next.
Ladies and gentlemen, 10 hours ago, a tragedy happened near Kiev. The helicopter crash claimed lives of the Minister of the Internal Affairs of Ukraine, his colleagues, and helicopter crew when it fell near a kindergarten. 14 of Ukrainian families lost their loved ones today, and many more families are losing daily because of the war. And I shall ask you to honor the memory of every person Ukraine has lost with a minute of silence, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for this minute. Only 1 minute, but it keeps the memory about so many people. Ukraine lives thousands of such minutes, including 3 minutes on January 14th. 3 minutes. The time it took for a Russian missile to travel hundreds of kilometers, hit a residential block in Dnipro and kill at least 45 people. 45 adults, children, 45. My address will be short about the time we are short of, about small minutes, about years made of these minutes. 3 years ago, I spoke at Davos for the first time in person. The topic was how to build a cohesive and sustainable world. I'm talking online now. And the topic is how to operate in a divided, fragmented world. Conclusions, they are obvious. The world cannot keep the pace with changes and challenges. The list of crises, global security, environmental, food security, energy ones, needs to be amended with another one. The time crisis. The list of calls for decisive, efficient joint actions needs to be expanded with one more. The call for speed. The speed of decisions making. Reaction of the civilized world. Tragedies are outpacing life. The tyranny is outpacing the democracy. Russia needed less than 1 second to start the war. The world needed days to react with first sanctions. The time the free world uses to think is used by the terrorist state to kill. Ukraine and its allies have been resisting it for almost a year. This period proved all our prompt actions brought positive results. The opening of European borders for Ukrainians, the grain deal, the energy unity. Together they saved millions of lives. And not only in Ukraine. It is not only Ukraine, but the whole world needs exactly this pace of decisions and actions. The world was hesitant in 2014 when Russia, without hesitation, occupied the Crimea. The world was hesitant in 2022 when Russia, without hesitation, made the war full scale. The world must not hesitate today and ever. When the evil seeks revenge, the world needs resolve and speed. Russia is exporting terror. Russia is spreading the strain of the war around the world. Ukraine offers the world a peace formula. Please, 10 steps that the world must make faster than Russia makes its new moves. Mobilization of the world must outpace the next military mobilization of our joint enemy. The supply of Ukraine with air defense systems must outpace Russia's next missile attacks. The supplies of Western tanks must outpace another invasion of Russian tanks. The restoration of security and peace in Ukraine must outpace Russia's attacks on security and peace in other countries. A tribunal for military crimes must prevent new ones. The extension of NATO and the EU must outgo the spread of the Russian aggression. We routinely defend values which some of the allies take for granted as a fact of life. For us, the fact of life is the world in need of resolute and prompt steps. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago was my first time at the WEF. It was the time when the world was fighting COVID-19. It fought and won. Now the world is fighting against Putin. In 3 years, we will be discussing new challenges and threats in Davos. What will this mean? It will mean we will definitely overcome the current threat. The history repeats itself. At first, the world either fails to notice or underestimates a threat. Then it unites to resist it, and then the world wins. Every time, the same outcome. The world overcame Nazism, the apartheid, pandemics, the indifference to climate changes, financial crisis, and the Kremlin strain. The world will overcome again. This is how much can be said in a matter of minutes. This is how much can be understood in a matter of minutes. The world will overcome again. The time is high to make it happen faster. Slava Ukraini.
Mr. President, thank you so much for that moving address. Let me ask you a few questions. I know how pressed you are, so thank you in advance for this. And of course, let me extend My condolences, and I think everybody in this
Yes.
audience's condolences for the terrible tragedy
Yes.
that took place in Ukraine. In November and December, the world watched with amazement as Ukrainian forces liberated one town and city after another. It seems now as though the war has moved into something that looks more like a stalemate. Can you tell us what the war looks like to you on the front lines right now?
Дякую за запитання. If I can I switch on Ukrainian language. Thank you so much. Yeah, please. Ви знаєте,
Question,
знаєте, Фарід, я дякую.
Farid, thank you for your condolences, by the way. I think
У будь-який момент, з самого початку. І тут це не залежить від цього.
the war doesn't look
Уповільнюється.
good. It has not been good since the beginning, and really in the winter time it slows down for known and understandable reasons. Everyone gets tired, the nature, the people, and thanks God the enemy too. How it looks. It looks as follows. Daily arduous fights in the east of our country. We are standing strongly, resolutely. I am thankful to all of our warriors, the living ones, the ones that we've unfortunately lost for their bravery. It's very important to know that we are strong, not just in the east of our country where it's really hard, but we are also strong inside the nation, inside our state. We are united, we are mobilized because we are motivated. It was not us who started the war, but it is us who will have to end it on our land, having it deoccupied. With due respect to our people and our sovereignty. As regards other parts of our nation, the south, the north parts, we do control the situation, and definitely the processes have slowed down a bit for a variety of reasons. And it is not just about us keeping united inside the country. We need to have the whole world united around our joint values. And because of that, we truly need to continue that support of Ukraine, to continue with supplies of necessary ammunition that we require to get the victory over the enemy on the battlefield. We also need the financial support of it. I'd like to thank all the nations, the European Union, for their support of our budget deficit, and they're continuing to support us this year. I also think it is really important that, given the energy challenges that we are seeing, and these are surely related to disrespect of the humankind, of the attacks against our grid, against our energy sector with Iranian drones, with Russian missiles, in order to instill chaos inside the country. Because of that, we definitely need assistance from our partners with a defense system. Lots of these. I know this is a deficit, but I'd like to thank many countries worldwide for their assistance, also with alternative energy connectivity solutions. From what it looks like now, Russia intends to get this revenge, and we think that they will succeed because they're fighting not just Ukraine, but the whole civilized approach towards life. Thank you.
Yesterday in Davos, Henry Kissinger suggested that while Ukraine must be supported, and in fact he came out in favor of Ukraine's membership in NATO, there must also be a dialogue with Russia, because Russia must be a part of the global order. You know Russia very well, you speak Russian fluently. What are your thoughts on
Russia's place in the world?
I don't know the proper place for it. I think that Russia has already earned a place among terrorists. And this no longer depends on their leadership. No, I think the leaders are no longer affecting the development of Russian Federation, its culture, and so on. Everything depends on the strength of Ukraine, its support by the partners, the political support from the world, as well as from the Russian society. They have to open their eyes if they want to see the future of the Russian Federation with their eyes. They will have to recognize their own mistakes, they will have to recognize the UN statutes, and they will have to really respect our territorial integrity. I'm really glad to hear that Mr. Kissinger changed his mind. Our priority today, our political task today, is to see the different political leaders and figures, those who are still very relevant or have been relevant until recently, for them to be able to recognize the great mistake that Putin committed, for them to recognize this is Russia's aggression. These moments, it is very important for them as well to politically pressure on Russia to stop this bloody aggression. As regards NATO, we clearly understand that security guarantees are among the top priorities for us. Speaking of our formula for peace, it is among the 10 priorities. You understand that at the moment we are not in NATO yet. Unfortunately, Russia does understand this as well, and they do their damnedest to not make it easier for us to join. But we are on the way towards NATO because NATO is the best security guarantee for us, for our country, for our kids, for our country. So we have suggested security guarantees for our nation, and we think that the civilized world is going to support our proposals.
Finally, Mr. President, the accident, the helicopter crash, we think was an accident. We hope it was an accident, but it did raise in my mind, and it of course must have raised in your mind, the question of your own safety. Do you feel that there are still ongoing active threats that are increasing? Do you worry about your own security every day?
No, I'm not worried about that. I don't have anything to add here.
Well, you said it. You don't need a ride. You need ammunition, right?
No, nothing has changed. We still need ammunition. I'm not in haste to anything, to anywhere.
Amen.
Just to add with your permission. You said accident. I'd like to tell you that because of the war experience that I have now, my society has now, this is not an accident because it has been due to war, and the war has many dimensions, not just on the battlefield. There are no accidents at wartime. These are all war results, absolutely. All those steps, everything happening, missiles striking our civilians, our kids being killed in kindergartens and schools. Someone might try with bad information that it was us who had our own civilians at the crosshairs, and they were just wanted to hit some power block and that just a mishap. This is different. Just empty words. Every individual, every death is a result of the war.
Mr. President, thank you for your time. You've been very generous. Best of luck.
Wow.
Let me invite our
Looks like a standing ovation there for President Volodymyr Zelensky in speaking to our Fareed Zakaria at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Jill Doherty has been listening in on this as well as all of us together. Jill, this was an urgent, raw and real kind of plea coming from the Ukrainian president. It also felt like he was trying to tell the world to wake up.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was really very interesting. He begins with an emotional moment, which is the death of senior members of his government and personal friends, you know, who were in there staying in Kiev right at the beginning of the war. So it's a very emotional moment. But then he turns and I think made a very, very strong plea for do it now. I mean, he talks about the missile coming from Russia taking 3 minutes to hit Dnipro, where all those people died in the apartment building. And then he says, this is a time crisis and speed is of the essence right now. I think what he's doing, especially to the Europeans and to the Americans, is saying, you know, you talk a lot. And he refers to that. If Putin invades and it takes weeks, you know, for the Europeans to get it together to respond. The United States is slow as well. So he's saying there is no more time. You know, speed is necessary for both decisions and action. And action that he's talking about right now is more weapons that he feels are crucial for Ukraine right now, not only to defend itself, but to push the Russians back. So it was a very, very interesting talk. And Kate, one more thing that I think he was doing, although it came in the question with Fareed, was he was saying Russian society has to open its eyes. You know, there are actually some people in Moscow who went out in the cold, right in Moscow, to lay flowers at a Ukrainian monument, actually not far from the CNN bureau, in fact. Been there many times. And in honor and memory of the people who died in that apartment building. And so what he's saying is, you know, Russian society has to realize what the government is doing. And that I think is a message, you know, directed to Russians. It could be effective.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, he said the world hesitated while Russia did not. The world must not hesitate. And he means that very urgently now because the time is now. Great to see you, Jill. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being for me. I really appreciate it. All right, we do want to turn to the other major story that we were watching at this hour, which is prosecutors laying out extensive new evidence in court this morning.
Oh, me. I told them within the first 48 hours after it broke out that they needed to aggressively take this serious.
He basically lays out the questions for his plan in the Google searches, as prosecutors allege. And then you have the science. And the science is the part that really hasn't been discussed before.
That's talking about a murder. Just something different. I don't know if they'll go back to that other guy speaking or not. I wish they would, but they may not. They was talking a great deal about energy a while ago, pertaining to fossil fuel and wind, solar, battery, etc. And this other stuff.
An impression on people and make
this other stuff come up that was more vital. So it basically pushed that to the back burner. The prime minister there was making a very, very good, or whoever he was, making a very good speech that it is essential that we take global warming in a very, very real factor, and that the whole world needed to jump on board immediately if we was going to be successful in overcoming this 1.5 degree temperature change that I think has already done occurred, if I'm not mistaken. The way I understand it, that there's lots of evidence to show that the water is warmed up like 3 degrees more than what it ordinarily is. So that in and of itself tells me that the planet is on its way of intensely warming up. This here is pertaining to the Arab part of the Arab upspring here. Let's hear what they got to say real quick.
Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Jordan and Egypt have been meeting here today in Abu Dhabi. The leaders met to discuss security, political and economic cooperation. Representatives from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Iraq, who have taken part in similar meetings in the recent past, were absent from this Abu Dhabi gathering. Well, this comes a day after the UAE marked a year since the Houthi missile and drone attack killed 3 people in Abu Dhabi. In the aftermath of that attack, the UAE's ambassador to the UN, Lana Nusseibeh, told me the UAE reserves the right to defend itself. Have a listen.
We will continue to prevail, and at the same time we will reserve the right to defend ourselves, and that right will be practiced in a manner consistent with international law, and it will be proportionate and abide by international humanitarian law. But at the same time, we reserve the full right to defend the security and safety of the millions of people from different countries around the world who have chosen to travel to the UAE and have chosen to call the UAE their home. 32,000, upward of 32,000 people transit through Abu Dhabi airport every day. And that was one of the targets, as we know now, of the 17th January attack.
That was Lana Nusseibeh speaking to me this time last year. Well, the White House released a statement from President Joe Biden on Tuesday saying 1 year ago in a terrorist attack launched from Yemen, 2 ballistic missiles and a series of drones targeted civilian sites in the United Arab Emirates. Today we remember the lives that were so tragically lost, and we reaffirm the United States' commitment to the safety and security of the Emirati people. Well, my next guest is Abdul Khalik Abdullah, who's an Emirati political science professor. I want to talk about the anniversary, as it were, or the 1 year on of the attack on the UAE by Houthi armed drones momentarily, because it's an important anniversary, and one that the White House this year has marked and acknowledged, which is very different to its response or lack of response this time last year, which infuriated the UAE. Before I do that, let's just talk about the meeting that was here earlier. The readout of the meeting suggesting the leaders met to discuss political, economic and security cooperation. I want you to drill down, because that's a very anodyne statement, anodyne readout. Drill down for us, if you will. What are the priorities of these countries? And let's remind ourselves specifically the UAE and Qatar together today here in the Abu Dhabi, only recently back on speaking terms, of course. What do you make of what we saw?
Well, thanks for having me, Becky, again here. And UAE, Abu Dhabi in particular, has not been short of receiving dignitaries, global leaders, regional leaders for the past year, and especially lately. So this comes as continuation of Abu Dhabi receiving regional leaders. This meeting, however, in a way, I could read it as a show of solidarity with the UAE, which is going through, as you correctly said, the first anniversary of the attack. But there is plenty to talk about when you have such a gathering. And I think on top of these issues that are of important and concern to all of us, is how do we bring back some kind of stability to a region that has lost its stability in the aftermath of the Arab Spring. So these guys, these leaders in Abu Dhabi here is in a way showing solidarity, but they also discussing regional stability.
regional stability, which will include, of course, Israel and the Palestinian issue. And this meeting comes on the heels of a gathering of leaders of Egypt and Jordan, specifically with the Palestinians in Egypt recently. When you look at the photograph that we have shown of those who met in Abu Dhabi today, what next for the Palestinians and for how the impact on the ground, on the streets, of support for Palestinians around this region means for those gathered leaders?
I think the Palestinians are probably facing one of their toughest moments in their struggle because of this very right-wing government that we have to deal with, the Netanyahu and his company. So I think there is a message here that comes out of this meeting to the Palestinians. We're not turning our back on the Palestinian causes. We're going to be there for them. And I think the Palestinian issue was probably among the top issues that was discussed. And how to deal with this new government in Israel is probably another issue there. It's going to be very awkward going through with a normal relationship when you have people like Ben Gaffer, among others, that are just expansionist, wants to annex all of the West Bank. So I think when these leaders meet, I think that definitely this kind of common position as to how do we deal with this government in Israel, this probably has been discussed thoroughly.
Notably absent, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and one would expect the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to have been representing that country. What do you make of his absence from that grouping?
I wouldn't make a big deal out of it. I think those who made it is the one that are welcomed, and those who were absent have their own reasons for not making it. I think Saudi Arabia today is very much into its own internal domestic issue. They are very much busy with the Vision 2030, but I think they know exactly what this meeting is all about, and they will be fully briefed in due time. So I really don't feel anything about the fact that maybe one or two, especially the leader of Saudi Arabia, has not made it because maybe he has a full schedule, and this is probably was a prompt. It was arranged in very late notice, so I wouldn't make a big deal out of those who did not make it.
Right. And we're supposed to accept that. I think you've heard enough here today pertaining to this filming, this video here that I've made in regards towards certain things that's going on, especially with the environmental crisis and especially with the war. It has reached a pivotal point with the war in seeing how desperate, how absolutely desperate that this man is to prove his point pertaining to bringing destruction upon to his own people. And that's the only way that you can defy it at this point in time, because he knows, Putin knows, that the majority of the world is against him. And if he has not already felt the retribution pertaining to various major corporations walking away from him and leaving him high and dry, kind of like how the church world done me here for the past 30 plus years. If he hadn't recognized that by now, in identifying the fact that, okay, if he wins this fight, he's really going to have to put it all on the line to the degree that he's going to take a chance on his own country, his own people being desecrated. Because it's moving into that arena towards it now evolving a lot of people. And that is something that a great deal of the war analysts have talked about, that the deal with Ukraine was only being used as some sort of a pawn in regards towards how he truly feels about not just saying that the Western world had shortened the Russian oligarchs, but that the rest of society has too as well. So for this guy to emerge into nuclear activity would not surprise me, because of his desperateness. He is showing his desperateness, like this commentary talked about a while ago, that obviously he has missed his mark towards thinking that he was going to be able to take these people over and that they would be begging for mercy within the first 72 hours. Within a very short length of time, he thought that he could win them over, either out of fear or intimidation or whatever. And obviously he has misjudged his own leadership qualities, that now is going to put him in a very, very difficult spot pertaining to his arrogance and him being prideful. And now we may see the wounded bear show its viciousness even more so. And that's what the rest of the world needs to recognize. They need to recognize that this man, instead of him settling down or wanting to work out some sort of peace negotiations with the rest of the world, or with the Ukrainians, because of the rest of the world, the way the rest of the world feels, he's actually still pursuing this. And he knows what this is going to lead into. They're not stupid. And to me, that's exactly what they want to do. They want to bring distress to defeat their humiliation. Rather than them face their humiliation, they probably rather would die at this point in time. Or that's what Putin is speaking for his own people about. Now, if everybody in there felt that way, I don't think that they would have been going to the Ukrainian memorial not far from the CNN headquarters and putting flowers and stuff on that particular memorial. So obviously there are some people that live around or in the Russian capital, the Kremlin, that don't feel the same way that he feels. But to think that you have somebody in office that's willing to bring destruction and remorse to his own people this way, to me, it speaks volumes about what type of true, unsettling leader that poisonous Putin actually is, especially at the expense of bringing death and destruction to his own people. And that's exactly the road that he's taking right now. If he don't regroup, I mean, whenever you're getting all your worst of worst prisoners out of your jails, and of course he immediately lied to his own people, because he told his own people that this wasn't going to be just a skirmish and that it wasn't going to be a full-fledged war. And now he's already done infiltrated towards mandatory, basically drafts. So he's steadily fish crawling backwards in the things that he has talked about on the front end, that obviously we can see as an audience, as spectators watching all this. But if he's got his own people brainwashed, bamboozled, under some sort of hypnotic, bewitching spell, they're probably willing to go down with him. And that's really, really sad. And it's not only sad, but it's dangerous. Because once you identify that this is no longer a one-man pony show, but this is a whole group of people now that is supporting that one-man pony show, then it becomes extraordinarily difficult and very, very dangerous. This is the reason why that I immediately, within the first 48 hours, said that what how this should be addressed is in a very, very serious moment, because you're not dealing with goat herders. You're dealing with people that's got a good mind. You're dealing with people that are very intriguing and inquisitive. You're dealing with people that are very aggressive. You're dealing with people that bloodshed and war is nothing unusual for them. It's nothing unusual for them. If you go all the way back to the Khan days and all the way back to the Viking days, you'll see where they have been an aggressive people. Matter of fact, it was the Russians that migrated over to Europe, and then it was the Europeans that migrated over to America that basically desecrated the red man. So that gene that I'm talking about obviously is still living in their bloodstreams and over in that area even to this day. They're very, very vicious people, and now the bear is wounded. Now the bear feels shame. Now the bear feels humiliation. Now the bear is wondering, oh wow, have I attacked something that I shouldn't have attacked? So rather than the bear doing the proper and right thing towards going back into its little hiding place, now the bear is even going to become that much more aggressive. And whenever I say aggressive, I'm talking about that it is a strong possibility, and we've said this all along, that their whole concept was not Ukrainians, but it was take back over all the ground and all the property that they feel like that they've gotten beaten out of, going back, I guess, 200 years ago. Because at one time, they supposedly had a big part of Alaska. At one time, they had part of California, the northern part of California, if you can believe that. I guess he's going to try to redeem his people in taking over all the property and all the land mass that they feel like that they have lost. So whenever you're dealing with this type of idiocy, and that's exactly the category that you have to put it in. You have to put it in the category of idiocy. Now you're talking about a whole different ball game of dangers, not just to the Ukrainians, but to the whole region. Now you're talking about something that is reaching the climax of another Adolf Hitler. Another person that wants to dominate and dictate through the leadership of being a dictator, in trying to whitewash democracy down the drain, as if democracy was one of the worst things in the world, that most, well, not most, but a great deal of people think that was a good thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this in ending. Whenever it comes to the very thing that we have talked about all along, in democracy versus autocracy, it's very obvious whenever it comes to the hypocrisy of their autocracy that they speak, forked man speaketh with both, white man speaketh with forked tongue. He's not to be trusted. They're not believable. The things that they're involved in right now with the Ukrainians, it's very obvious that they could care less about the lives of innocent citizens towards targeting them purposely, willfully, intentionally. And if the world don't wake up to this type of aggression, I'm just afraid the world may not wake up, or if they do wake up, they'll wake up in another world, because their world may vanish or disappear pertaining to nuclear activity. And it's extremely, extremely dangerous. The words that I'm talking about right now are extremely, extremely dangerous. And once more, I didn't get involved in the ministry business going back with the two hands that saved my life in 1983, me saying something about the Antichrist, that I would face the Antichrist, and before the poison arrow struck the flesh of my skin, that I would vanish or disappear. That basically this was going to be whenever the rapture or the taking away of the saints occurred, pertaining to the second coming, the first resurrection, the first global resurrection. I didn't get involved in this because of this, but I can now see where the Heavenly Father has anointed me in this to try to prevent from the very thing that's the world's worst nightmare that now could suddenly occur. I don't trust that guy right there in that white robe, or whatever they want to call it, from the Arab states, no more than I trust a great deal of the people over in that area than I do the Russians. I don't trust the Russians no more than I do the people from North Korea. There's a lot of people in the world that whenever they get on TV and I listen to their rhetoric, I know that they are blowing smoke out of their rear ends, because they was part, the very people that we're looking at right there, right now, with them white looking robes, the Saudi Arabian Arab Spring, they was the very ones that promulgated the Sharia law, that still to this day support the Sharia law. They are the very ones that refuses to acknowledge any type of humanitarian rights pertaining to their own citizens, especially with women. And they're the ones working through other various groups that have made claims that they are going to dominate the world. And the first person that they're going to eliminate, according to their point of view, is Israel. And the second ones that they're going to overtake is America. Because America stands for the same thing that Israel stands for, which is the holiness and the righteousness of God Almighty through the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ. Trust me, whenever you talk about antichrists, you're not going to get much any deeper towards being antichrists than you are towards the very human being that you're looking at right there on the right-hand side. Now, they'll tell you, oh, we're conforming, we're doing this and we're doing that, and oh, we have big expectations towards the future, and we're going to build here and we're going to do that. And maybe to some degree, they're actually convinced in their own lies, because they know that now they're under a spotlight, this national spotlight, especially through the pretense of social media and satellite, internet, smartphone technology, etc. They know that they're under a spotlight. But that don't make no difference. Eventually, that won't make no difference. You know why I say that? Because it's not making no difference with the Russians. With Putin right now, he knows he's under the spotlight. He knows what kind of a hole that he's digging himself into pertaining to killing innocent men, women, and children. So whenever it comes to people being, I guess the right word would be overbearing, and that's saying it mildly, that's saying it very conservatively. Whenever it comes to people being overbearing, I guarantee you, whenever it's all said and done, these people are not going to mind in showing the world their true colors. Now, they walk around in white. White's supposed to be known as purity. What they should be wearing is all black, because in actuality, that's exactly what the Saudi Arabians and a great deal of that European Persian Peninsula stands for, is nothing more than the oligarch of tyranny. The same thing as what we're looking at over in Russia. And if people can't see through that and identify that, well, then they're blinder than a bat, as far as I'm concerned. Blinder than a bat. These are all deceptions of disguisements that Jesus talked about in the last days, that they would come in sheep's clothing. Look at them. Boy, that white looks nice, don't it? The white really looks good. Oh, that's a color of purity. That's a color of cleanliness. That's a color of wholeness. It's supposed to be that color. I promise you, with those people, the Arabs wearing that color, is one of the biggest disguises that you've ever laid your entire eyes on. At least the people in Russia aren't trying to be hypocritical in what they're doing. They're not trying to disguise themselves. I mean, they are bringing up a bunch of BS stuff towards saying that it was all justifiable because of the Western world, and now they're turning it into a Ponzi war and etc. What was we supposed to have done? Just sit back and just let them mutilate the Ukrainians, knowing that the Ukrainians was basically our allies? What was not only the Western world, but what is the rest of the world supposed to do? So that's the turning point of where we're at right now, that our president, Mr. Putin, talked about, and it will either go one way or the other, and I'm pretty sure the way that it's going to go is not going to be a pleasant way for it to go into. That's the reason why I said what I said whenever it first broke out. Within the first 48 hours, you need to go at this gun-ho, all hands on deck, because these people are just as devious, they're just as deceitful as that person that you got through seeing wearing that white robe. Just as deceitful. Tell you one thing, while the whole time they have plans of doing something completely different. They're not to be trusted. They're imposters in trying to get out onto the international stage towards making themselves look like that they're humanitarians and they're for the poor man and the unfortunate people. But I guarantee you the people that they're for is themselves through the Sharia law that has already made a stance. I think it was in 93 that they plan on dominating all of society all over the planet. And whenever they make a statement like that, I'm pretty sure they intend to do just exactly that. Now, they can disguise themselves all they want to, and y'all can believe all the lies that you want to believe, because that's obvious what the Western world over here has been doing now for quite some time whenever it comes to the Saudi Arabians. But I guarantee you, before it's over with, you will see where the Windmill Ministries missions has been right all along towards who plotted, planned, financed, and supported the death of almost 3,000 people pertaining to 9/11. Now, naturally, they're going to deny that. They're going to squander from that. They're going to say, oh no, you're wrong. But we have data to prove that we're right. We had too many investigations through the FBI and other central intelligence organizations that can bring up records to where where the money trail was coming from and who was actually financing the terrorists being over here in America before they actually hit the Twin Towers. We can prove that the Saudi Arabians was in behind it. Now, we can ignore the fact and let those people's death die in vain and not try to liberate their deaths in a justifiable way, just like we can sit idly by and let the Ukrainians basically be butchered, be an onslaught, be nothing but a slaughter. And once it gets to the point that there's no true justice here up onto the planet, regardless whether it's coming from the European areas or coming from China or coming from America, that's whenever you have to worry about the wrath of God falling upon this planet, such as you have never, ever seen or ever will see again, pertaining to him coming back in flaming fire, taking vengeance upon this planet, such as you would never, ever expect or believe, that will throw this planet off into a primitive state where all the houses, all the businesses, all the satellites, anything that's got computer technology software in it will basically shut down or burn up, and you will look at a chaotic state here on the planet such as you could not even begin to fathom. We are that close, my friends. We are that close of seeing this occur. Abraham had a message. Noah had a message. Other prophets of God had messages. They was messengers. Jesus had a message. I, the founder of the Windmill Ministries, has a message. The message was not supported. It was not, I don't know if they didn't think it was believable or if they just was so intimidated by the fact that they're going to be here during the opening of part of those seals being opened, that the church world was just so intimidated by it that they wasn't going to support or back up or believe my message. Well, now they've dug themselves off into a hole with being $32 trillion in debt. All their jails is full. Their classes is failing. COVID has taken over pertaining to sicknesses, gun violence, drug overdoses, drug use, illegal immigrants coming over the border, and on and on and on. And if you don't believe me, all you got to do is open your eyes. You don't have to do a whole lot of investigating. Just open your eyes and listen to the news a little bit, and you will hear and see what's happening. And that's in addition to the forces of nature going absolutely berserk pertaining to global warming. If you'll put all of them dots together, now you're creating the very same thing that Winston Churchill said about the American Civil War, that all the ingredients lined up together to the extent that the Civil War in America was unpreventable. That's why I continue to keep making these videos and continually keep voicing my opinion. I am trying to help the world, the people in the world, especially God's people in the world, of reaching that what do you call a mountain at its highest peak? Pivotal point of basically the point of no return of all the elements coming together in seeing our planet be thrown off in the Great Tribulation. And we are so close to it right now. It is unremarkable in how close we're within, not fractions, millihair fractions of this occurring. And it could occur before I go to bed tonight. It could occur before I wake up in the morning. And I'm telling you right now, whenever it comes to who's going to have the last say, it's not going to be the devil and the devil's people here upon to the planet. It will be God and God's people that will intervene. Just as the Word of God says, it will be the Lord's people, the meek, that will inherit this earth. This earth has never belonged to the Lucifer.